This is the Local Real Estate Developer Podcast, where we share the stories of locals across the country who took that empty lot or that old building and turned it into something awesome that their community needs. I'm Kristi Kandel, and I've been a real estate developer my entire career. My co-host Raphael is a commercial broker, and together we're sharing the stories of locals making a huge impact on their communities. And what we've learned is you don't need millions in the bank or decades of experience to get started. You just need the confidence, tools, and the right people around you. This podcast is your chance to gain the confidence to get in the game, because real estate development isn't just for the insiders anymore. It's for people like you too. Welcome to the Local Real Estate Developer Podcast, where we share the stories of local developers who have done the thing, and we get to hear how they did their deals. I'm Kristi Kandel. I'm your co-host, and I've been a real estate developer, mentor, and I teach locals how to become real estate developers in their own backyard. And I'm joined with my co-host, Raphael.
Thanks, Kristi. It's good to see you as always. My name is Raphael Collazo. I'm a commercial broker and investor here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm really excited to be here with Kristi as always. And today we have a very special guest who's actually my business partner here locally, Will Bockoven. He's a real estate person extraordinaire, and we're excited to learn a little bit more about his story. So, Will, welcome to the show, my friend.
Happy to be here. Thanks for hosting this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're coming to you live from our media room that we just built out, so it's kind of a fun addition there. But to start out, what we typically like to do is just kind of learn a little bit more about the person and kind of what got them into the business. So if you don't mind kind of sharing a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I grew up in a family business, so I had an entrepreneurial streak, I guess. My family was in the construction business. Always knew I wanted to work for myself. I think that's what got started. That family business, eventually, we sold everything. Everyone retired and whatnot. They made their money, and we were left with a property. That's what got me interested in real estate. I guess that's the first start. And then the second half was after managing it, just becoming a broker, learning out about transactions and how to get tenants and deal with issues. So it started accidentally, I guess.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And we started our firm back in January. So beforehand, we were at different firms, and we kind of just got together. After a while, we had known each other for about a year and a half before then, and we just kept in touch over time. And the more and more we talked, about our previous experiences. We saw some similarities in the way that we viewed the world and our visions for the future. And so we ended up deciding to start our own firm, Summit Commercial Group. And ever since then, we've been operating here. The future looks bright, as they say. But yeah,
I love
we're
that.
excited.
Clearly an entrepreneurial bug. If you did that and you were managing, then became a broker, and then now started this company. So that's awesome. So as far as like when we get into real estate development, can you maybe tell us about your first deal of how you got into that aspect of it?
Sure. Well, I would say I was a co-developer. I had another business partner, and we did it together. Actually, we had several. But yeah, I did a lot of the work with it. So the first project was big for us. It was a big undertaking. It was an adaptive reuse project in Lexington, Kentucky. It was a 6-story office building, and we converted it from office use to residential. And actually, it became Airbnb, 23 Airbnb units.
Right on. So question on that. What year was this? Because that's the hot new thing ever since COVID, that people are saying, hey, let's convert office to residential. And we know from experience, not every building can do that. So what year or timing was this project?
Yeah, so this was 2020. So we were right in the eye of the storm of COVID. So lots of challenges, lots of problems, but we had such a great price that we thought we could pull them up.
Yeah. And that we talk about it all the time. We have a few deals we're looking at currently. And I mean, just getting in at the right basis helps to alleviate some of the concerns that ultimately arise. And I'm sure during this conversation we're going to get into, you'll see some of the things they had to deal with, which is pretty amazing that was your first project, because I'm just like, wow, like that is a big undertaking. So
yeah, I'm very excited about getting in. So maybe can you describe who were the partners that you went in with? Because we know development, a lot of the times you are going to have multiple GPs or partners in a deal because they do take so long and you need different strengths. So maybe who the partners were and some of the early phases of that project.
Sure, no problem. And I'll just describe them. It's probably easier. We were 4 partners all together. I was a broker. My business partner was also a broker. He had some development experience as well. And then we had 2 positions that were more passive. Now, it was put together. It wasn't like an exotic GPLP. We were all members in an LLC. The 2 positions, we like to say they were the money guys. And we brought some of the know-how and the sweat equity and whatnot. We all contributed financially to the deal, but 4 owners in total. It was both of us, me and my business partner, both were very active in the day-to-day with contractor, the entire scope from start to finish. So 4 partners altogether.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm sure he's going to reference too is this was a phase type of project. Well, I think they had existing tenants in the building too that they had to work around. So they had office tenants that were on some of the floors that they maintained as they were going through the process of developing these additional spaces too. So is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as the partners go, there were just 4, but yeah, it was an older building, Art Deco, 1940s, and again, 6 stories, about 52,000 square feet. It had a subgrade parking garage as well, which I have a lot of parking experience in that industry here, so that helped. It was in various phases, and phase 1 was those top 3 floors. Floors 4, 5, and 6 converted into residential, which became Airbnb. But as you said, we had tenants we had to manage. So staging the materials, staging, and trying to operate. And this is a law firm too, one of our tenants. So
yeah, pretty reputable. Yeah,
pretty and that was quite a challenge to keep everybody happy.
Yeah, well, I mean, sound alone and just how you're hauling materials up. Did you, just pure curiosity, did you bring it in outside through cranes through the windows, or was there a service elevator that you were able to?
Well, we did. We had 2 vertical transportation. We have 2 elevators. We thought they were going to pop a window out and put a dumpster down there, and you see that long how they
like a chute or
yeah,
something.
Well, that didn't happen. Every piece of drywall, every acoustical tile went out through the service elevator, which was, I don't know how they did it. They wore that elevator out though.
Yeah. Yeah, you were mentioning that after the job, that elevator was pretty much ruined.
Yeah,
so
it
that's
was toast.
Another piece you had to factor in. So,
and when you were starting to convert that top part, was it always meant to be Airbnb, or was that a pivot when you realized, hey, the location's key, we need to get revenues up more, and switched over at that point?
Well, we always want to do Airbnb, but even as 5 years ago, the lending environment, banks were still pretty hesitant. Lenders were just not so sure about this Airbnb thing. So the revenue stream really wasn't, at least in the Kentucky market, they were a little cautious. So we were toggling between the 2. We thought, well, maybe we could do a hybrid mix, maybe something different. But once we ran the numbers, we realized that Airbnb, short-term rental, VRBO was the way to go.
Yeah. So, through that process, kind of walk us through maybe the initial phase. How do you identify the opportunity? How did you pitch the idea? Because at that point, I'm assuming, you saw this building, you saw it could be acquired at a very reasonable basis based on the fact that you're pretty knowledgeable about that market. And then you decided to, create that pro forma that you then approach banks with. So talk to us a little bit about that process. Because a lot of people that listen to the podcast are people who are aspiring developers, and they're trying to find an opportunity. So one of the pieces of finding an opportunity is knowing what to look for. So if we can identify that, and then we can dive into the actual nuances of each of the phases, people can get an idea of how it all worked out.
Sure. So the question being how to evaluate potential candidates for these types of projects. It starts with a really good location and a really good price. And I think we were at that crossroads where we found both. And I think that's very rare. I think most of your time, energy, and effort is going to be devoted to really finding the property, that suitable candidate property that's well known, has visibility, everyone talks about, and then, of course, getting a good price. So that kind of covers a multitude of sins if you spend too much on construction, which we had a few challenges, few cost overruns there, as any building does. But I think it's just really finding a good building. Then the second part of that is just looking at the marketplace. It's nothing really exotic. It's just surveying the rents, the income possibilities, the potential, looking at other projects. There's a lot of what I call riding coattails. So I'm looking to see what's going on in the marketplace, finding out what other people are doing, and really just kind of copying that. You can do that. Networking with other developers, calling, asking questions, just getting out and walking. I think That's probably as much as building a pro forma, building a spreadsheet. And one part I want to mention too is kind of the emotional component to it. In the beginning, it's all a lot of fun. There's a lot of cheerleading and it's exciting. But when challenges come up, it gets kind of scary. And you have to just kind of push and make sure that your idea, is still viable. That's the hard part. And being kind of comfortable with uncertainty is another one. Those are
I love those points because it does. The shiny object will wear off. Your project will probably blow up 2 to 4 times where you think, oh my gosh, like what did I do? This isn't going to work out. And as you put it back together and you're a problem solver, you're not risk averse, you're a problem solver, and it's just a matter of putting it back together in a slightly different way where the numbers do work. So as you guys were going into this project, so you found it, you're a broker, you're working in the market, and you started to work through, what were some of the steps or nuances with maybe doing the zoning and entitlements for the different uses, and maybe the city part of permitting and going through that process?
Sure. That was not a huge task for us. We didn't have a huge problem there. I think there were a lot of delays because the cities in general, I mean, I don't think it's any secret, they are not really incentivized to move fast on anything. During COVID, that was a real challenge there. But as far as the approval goes, we didn't really have, at least in our marketplace, we didn't have to have permission for a short-term rental. It was more, is it built to code? But it wasn't really a use change or zoning or anything like that. So we didn't have a problem there. I think it was all just the typical feet dragging that you see with local government inspectors and whatnot that we faced, really.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm kind of curious about, and you alluded to it a little bit, Kristi, is that not a lot of these not all office building product can be converted into residential for a variety of reasons. But what made it so that this particular building was able to be done? It was able to be accomplished, and you were able to kind of make it functional?
Sure, great question. The best part about this building was the building was built in the 40s. But in 86, there was a major upgrade. They had a lot of glass, and that glass and sunlight really made it easy for the architect to kind of sketch in the different units. I think that's the biggest problem was it a narrow enough kind of floor plate to accommodate windows for all the units? And you're right, there's a lot in Louisville, Kentucky. We're in this older Victorian era city where there's beautiful properties, but there's just no way to put sunlight in, and you can't really do much with the properties. So narrow footprint, or a narrow floor plate, I should say.
Narrow floor plate helps. Any other items that could be considered core? Like, how does anything else?
Well, outside the actual configuration of the office, I think a major part of it is it walkable? Are there attractions people can walk to? And I think it's not really building construction type, but I think it's a major plus is how close.
And this building's like downtown on Main Street in Lexington. So I mean, you're talking, I mean, you could walk to a lot of restaurant, retail, pretty much all different types of retail in that little corridor. So it's a really great location.
And one more on the technical. What about the bathrooms per floor? Was that a challenge to design the utility infrastructure to each unit based on how the current layout was, or was that helpful in how it already?
Yeah, well, it wasn't necessarily difficult. It was just cost prohibitive. It was very expensive because you're changing. It's an office use to a residential use. So there is an enormous plumbing infrastructure. It's MEP, as they say in engineering. So it was the mechanical. It wasn't just the plumbing. It was HVAC, electrical, plumbing. All three. There was core drilling. There's very few people that know how to core drill through thick concrete plates, and we're kind of at their mercy. But yeah, that was a very expensive, not necessarily design challenge.
Yeah. And wasn't there a massive boiler system in the building too? Was that it?
There's a chiller on the and there was an old boiler on the roof. A lot of these buildings have these rooftop concepts, and that's very popular in Nashville. There's just no way. I mean, there's no room for it up there. But we had a chiller system, which don't ask me to explain it.
No, I get it. I don't blame you. I wouldn't even know where to begin. So talk to me a little bit about the contractor, how you're able to identify them, and then maybe talk a little bit about that early phase of the project and some of the challenges you all faced.
Contractor selection. I think Construction is difficult for anyone, and having a good, clear communication line with your contractor is really important. I'm smiling because it's just a challenge, for communication for everyone. So, of course, you want to find a contractor that has a track record of doing this, that they build. A lot of contractors don't like residential. You want to be able to tour their product. You want to make sure you know who you're talking to inside of the contractor team. Is the person you're talking to the salesperson, or is that going to be the site supervisor? So you want to look at what they've done before. Our particular experience was we worked with a smaller company. I think that helped. And we had daily communication. We aim for daily communication, then weekly formal group updates. So the key word is communication with your contractor.
I always like to say there is no such thing as over communicating in development and construction, and just making sure that what was said in the field is documented and sent back out. Everyone is on the same page, and it goes so far to in the long run towards success if you are able to communicate. And I would always tell the contractors, please tell me early and often if something comes up, because the earlier you tell me, the more time we have to fix the problem, which means the less money that we're going to need to spend to actually come up with a solution. And if you hide it and you go, I'm scared to tell you. So just creating that, creating a safe place for them to go, hey, I'm willing to have that conversation with you, goes a long way in building that trust that they can bring it up, because construction is going to have issues. So just being real and like, I know you're going to find something that is going to be a problem and we're going to need to solve it, but let's do it together.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one thing that Will brought up, because I was fascinated by this project, and I've talked to him on various different occasions about it. But one of the things that he talked about, which is I think important too, is hashing out how the project is going to lay out before you even get started, and that starts with the contract. And I know that he harps on it all the time. Make sure you engage with a construction attorney that knows these documents and can advise you on how to properly structure them so that you have your best interests and your protections in place, because you want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and the interests are aligned, because at the end of the day, yourself are the one who's going to take on the brunt of the cost associated with the project. And if those interests in some way aren't aligned because of how the document's written, then it could affect you potentially. And I'm not saying that all contractors, and this is just basic stuff. It's not necessarily that a contractor would just do it. It's mostly inadvertently than anything. It's just that if your skin's in the game, it's a lot different than if it's not.
Yeah, and engaging real estate attorneys to help with those contracts. Each state is different in what their requirements are for contracting and how those rules go. You'll have some lenders, the requirements layered in because they'll be processing the pay app. So getting that real estate attorney to help you with the contract specific to that community, who has the experience, who can help you ask the questions, because a lot of times there's going to be assumptions made. You've got the developer, depending on the level of experience, you're making assumptions on what the contractor's doing. The contractor's making assumptions on theirs. And sometimes that doesn't quite sync up. So just getting that third party in the contract to where it's all there. It's all clean. It's all there. It's so valuable.
Absolutely. Because to your point, you're going to be communicating throughout the process, and hopefully nothing happens that causes any issues. But in a situation where there's disagreement among the parties, that document is what dictates the next steps. So obviously you plan for the worst and hope for the best, as they say. So
yep. So phase 1 was the Airbnb that you guys ended up doing. What were the other phases of the project, and how did that roll out? And did you evict the attorneys? What happened there?
Oh no. So the phase 2 was we wanted to. I think the phase 2 was there's a retail component. There's a Subway. The whole idea was to kind of make it a lifestyle building, and it's still underway currently. I mean, this is a big project for that group. So this Subway, we thought, well, eventually when that lease agreement is up, maybe like a coffee shop would come in. And there's also another office user on the first floor. And it originally was a department store. It's very interesting. So in the 80s, at some point, I have to bring this up just to kind of talk about the phase 2, is they blocked off the entire front entryway with a glass block, which was really popular in the 80s, I guess. And they converted that into offices. So our idea was to eventually renovate that and restore it back to its original use, kind of have maybe an open air concept with a coffee shop and then maybe cycle bar. So that's phase 2, and that's still in the works. However, we did find a tenant for the third floor, which was a local energy company, renewable energy, and negotiated sign rights for the building as well. So 2 floors of office, 3 floors of residential short-term rental, and then the first floor being a retail component, which is still underway.
I love that. This is what we need to honestly get back to before our zoning code completely separated things out, is we need places to work and sleep, but we also need the gathering spots, those third places where we can go and we can grab coffee or we can grab a sandwich or just hang out and have that. And it sounds like the building's in a perfect spot in town to have a great mixed use building of all sorts of things. Hey, can we chat for a second? Since you're listening to this podcast, you're already thinking like a developer. You see the potential in your community, and you're ready to do more than just watch from the sidelines. That's exactly why we created the Local Developer Vault. It's a free resource full of tools, templates, and trainings to help you take action. And here's the best part. When you sign up, you'll also get access to our local real estate developer community. It's full of people just like you who are making real things happen in their neighborhoods. So don't just listen to the stories. Become the next one that we spotlight on our show. The link in the show notes to unlock the vault and join our movement.
Definitely. No, I agree. And so you mentioned during that first phase of the project, you are starting to do the demo work. It seems like during that process, the demolition crew was taking product through an elevator. I think we talked about it a little offline. So, that's probably counter to what you initially thought was going to happen, which you'd have like a chute going down like some dumpster and it would make it a little bit more efficient again. Counter to what you've experienced, and not necessarily experienced because this is your first project. So this is also a complete learning experience on the part of Will, and he's a brilliant guy, so he picks things up quickly. But it's also a learning experience for him. So I guess what were some of the next steps of that process, and what were some of the things that happened that were counter to what you thought, and how you were able to navigate those waters?
Well, yeah, and this is a little bit of a side topic. There's the emotional component, which doesn't have numbers. It's not neatly fixed in a box, but there's kind of like emotional management. How do you manage some of these things? But to touch on that a little bit, is learning the mentality that I thought, and what a lot of people think is, you're going to sign a contract and it's a finish line, and it's not a finish line. It's a starting line. You have to manage, like in real estate, you have to manage the managers. You have to add structure to your contractor, and you have to stay on it. So I can answer that entire topical question by saying that I had to add structure to everything. And what does that mean? There are pay applications that the lender uses when they release funds for payments to the contractors. Well, you don't just let it happen. You have to get involved. You have to read that to make sure. There are inventory items that contractors are purchasing to install. So if I go down and I see where they're staging equipment in the basement or in the parking garage downstairs, and there are 23 units and 23 HVAC units, why are there 27? So that's kind of the whole next set of steps, was just getting involved, rolling your sleeves up, never verifying everything, but adding structure is kind of the takeaway term.
And did you have go ahead, sorry. No, did you have a reference? I'm assuming when you guys are talking about daily communication, weekly updates, you had a Gantt chart or some form of document that you were able to refer to with the contractor so that you could verify some of this information. Is that correct?
We do. I don't think there's any one special way to do it, but yeah, there's a clipboard, and it's a sequence. There's a sequence in construction, and a lot of it has to do with there's a set of work done and there's inspections. So we know on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, this is when the sheetrockers are going to go in. Okay, well, if they're going to go in, was it inspected? You want to stay in tune. You want to see these things happening as well. Yeah. So you're almost like a site supervisor. And by the way, they're not thrilled with you being there, nor are their subs. There's a lot of eye rolling and such. So just FYI.
Ooh, the owners here, they don't know anything about construction. So we're just going to have to placate them. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, it's funny.
I think you earn their respect probably throughout the process. Like as you go, they start to understand that, no, we're teammates, but that is a dynamic you eventually get to. And not with all subs, but as long as it's with the contractor and the site superintendent.
And they always tell you what you want to hear. That's the thing about development, is you got the circle of all these people, and they're telling you and patting you on the back, and you're thinking, yeah, this is going great. Well, you have to evaluate that independently.
Did you ever do surprise site visits?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Because you
yeah.
have I found when we have our weekly meetings, then everyone knows and everyone's, dressed up, ready to go, has their stuff in order. But when I popped in a couple days later and just randomly, to see where things are at, it's like, okay. And that alone, I felt, again, not that contractors are not accountable and don't do a great job, but people are people. And sometimes if you just have some surprise accountability, that just helps move the project along because no one cares as much as you do.
And they have subcontractors too, and while like our contractor, I think they kept the job site, I'd say pretty tidy for the most part, and they took pride, but their subs might not, and that's a problem.
Yeah, just, and that's, I'm sure there's a lot of people that know this, but some may not, is that a general contractor isn't going to do all the work themselves. They have groups of people that they engage with, different sub verticals of the construction phase where they engage them, and they have to make sure that they're on site at a certain time doing the work they need to do. And so it's not just one person you have to hold accountable. Potentially there's multiple different parties involved in that whole construction process that you have to kind of make sure are doing what they need to do. And you can't just assume that one person's going to catch everything that could potentially be wrong. And it could be just it's just a misinterpretation or an issue on one of the subcontractors' part. They miss something or whatever, but that could cost you money, because if now, let's say that you lay the electrical or whatever, and then you put drywall up and they forget to put in insulation, which is something that one of our friends had to deal with recently, actually. So they literally had to tear down all the drywall and put up insulation. So it's like that sort of thing can cost you money, and that's an issue, right? So you got to make sure that you're there constantly making sure that things are being done right.
So true. Yeah, that was a good point on explaining the general contractor, because they are basically, some general contractors are self-performing and they have a lot of those trades underneath, drywall, painting, electrical, plumbing. Some just have a certain aspect and they sub it out. And the smaller the project, the more they'll probably have it with their in-house team. But as you go, so if you think about it, if you're hiring a general contractor, you're basically hiring a PM to manage all of the subcontractors. That's the general. Otherwise, you could manage your plumbers, electricians, HVAC, all of them, but you're going to be way more hands-on. So in theory, they're helping take a lot of that heavy lifting. And hopefully that they're working with subs that didn't just give them the lowest price, but they work with each other on all the jobs to where they're used to the dance of things. And if they're a well-oiled machine, they're going to actually, the electrician might call the plumber and say, hey, I'm a day behind, push yours back. They work so well together. But those, as you can see, the different layers of communication and things that could break down. And that's why you as the developer and the owner's rep need to be a little bit more in the weeds. Honestly, it's why I used to do, with our consulting, I used to do construction management, and I'm not part of that because that is such a hands-on project now. We'll help people through the overall project, but as far as construction manager, boots on the ground, we don't do that anymore just because it is so time intensive if you want to do it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. So you alluded to some of that, Will. So what were some of the other challenges you faced in the later phases of construction, and then we can talk a little bit about how it's operating today, and give the audience a little bit of perspective.
Well, there's a dirty word in construction. It's called change order, and a change order is basically just that. It's a deviation. It's something that happens for whatever reason that was different from the original set of completed plans. And nobody likes them, and contractors certainly don't. I don't blame them, because it's a whole like a sequence of events that have to happen. It just like a ripple effect. We had a few that were deliberate. We took the top suite. We converted. We took 3 units and made into one. We wanted to have an entire panoramic view of Main Street. So we had to start with the architect, and it was worth it for us because the price point was really high for renting out that unit, and it really made sense. Change orders was a some of them were arguable. Whose fault was this or who wasn't? Everyone's blaming each other. The architects blaming the MEP, and it goes on and on. Another one was just dealing with the pay app progress, like some percentages. As I mentioned before, there's a pay application every month, which is an incremental payment for work as it progresses. Well, sometimes there's a little debate over the percentage. So we had to make up a little different. It took a lot longer to build the property than we thought reconstruct it. That caused a renegotiation of the bank loan. That was pretty dramatic, or so I thought. I'd have to go back and revise what the loan says. So change orders, extension of time. This is all probably pretty typical stuff. I don't think this is anything that's out of the ordinary.
Yep. Every project will face these exact challenges, which is why I love that we're getting more into the weeds of this, because everyone's going to face it. It's things that you don't think about, but the actual operations part of doing a development and those nuances of it, because someone has to cut the checks, someone has to verify that the subs have been paid, someone has to coordinate with the lender and bank, and there's a whole other set of things outside of what you see physically happening in the field.
Yeah.
And just curious on your lender with the renegotiation, because it is a scary thing to go, oh, like, are they going to continue this project? Can you maybe do a tiny bit deeper dive into that, just so people can go, like, that is possible. It's not so scary. Let me talk to the bank and see what the options are.
Sure. Well, first, with lending, as brokers too, we talk to a lot of lenders, so we know them pretty well, and we have a pretty good reputation. I don't think we've irritated anyone yet, but we like smaller lending institutions that are local, and we love credit unions. So the credit union we use, like many, they have a loan committee. A lot of these larger banks that we all know about that are national and global, it's almost like they don't have bank branches. They have kiosks, and everything is in New York or wherever they're headquartered. But a local bank, local lender, you can talk to the market president, you can talk to the bank president. That was really helpful. The second is, in a lot of lending institutions, you have the banker or the lender or whoever their rep is, but you also have a real estate person somewhere in that lending institution that you can talk to and is looking at the payout. They're kind of almost like an underwriter. They're analyzing to make sure everything is according to bank regulations or whatnot. But if you talk to that person, you can get some good tips and some good guidance as well. So we had an interest-only loan. Our situation, it was very simple, very common, is we just need to extend it, and we negotiated, and it worked out fine.
Yeah, but I'm sure when you were having that conversation, it was probably not an easy one.
You had all the heartburn until you got to the finish line.
It was fine.
We're still going.
Yeah, it's fine. No worries. No, as he's sweating like bullets in the back, he's like PTSD over here.
Yeah. There was also, I'm also sensitive. I don't want to.
No, you don't. No, I'm not saying anything regarding that. But I appreciate your the way you're structuring the conversation.
If you see me glitching, that's like, how much should I say here?
Yeah.
But here's another one, and I think this is important. This is an important point. I don't think it's anything confidential. Make really, really sure that when you talk to the lender, whoever is representing that loan, that you understand exactly how that loan works, because we are in a situation where we did not, and we're all, pretty smart people. I think, we're two physicians, and I guess I've done a few things to be intelligent, but we didn't understand, and we didn't understand why a pay app wasn't made. Come to find out, we had to come up with an extremely
that is
worst case. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that is so huge, because they know their terms, and then they give you these papers that you're like, okay, there's a ton of words, a ton of pages. I don't know what the hell this means. And thankfully now we have tools like notebook.lm or other things that can help evaluate a contract for you to maybe help you ask the right questions of the lender. But at the end of the day, the lender, just like the architect, just like the engineer, just like the broker, just like the contractor, if they're giving you something and you don't understand it, ask questions until you get to, okay, this makes sense. And it doesn't matter. They are all so technical and in their silos that if they're good at their job, they know how to communicate that to you and how to get you to understand that. And if they're not, they might not be the right partner for you.
Yeah, no, 100%. And worst case too, I mean, I know it's an additional fee, but especially when you're starting to get into projects like this, like sometimes having an attorney review some of those docs probably is not a bad move. I know there's attorneys out there that work just in banking. Like I have several friends that are in that space, and they review loan docs all the time for people all across the country that are doing things. And in a situation like this, where it's a big enough project, I mean, even if you have to spend a little bit extra money to make sure that you have someone on your side with some of this, it probably may not be a bad move.
Yeah. There's transactional real estate attorneys who literally do everything from helping you negotiate the purchase and sale to helping you tenant leases to reading loan docs to working with the title company to clear up the title report to closing. So yes, there's a reason that there's lots of different real estate attorneys, but transactional real estate attorneys are very, very, very helpful and useful.
Definitely. Oh, so after the few gray hairs you got from this project, once you got it up and running, how did that phase work to try to get the Airbnbs kind of situated and figured out?
So stabilizing the asset.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, the stabilization piece.
Stabilizing. Well, we had our one office tenant that we procured. That was pretty simple. He had his own build out as well, which was challenging because they were very noisy and they were interrupting the other tenant, disturbing them. And there's not really much we can do, even though inside the lease we don't disturb our tenants. So that was the first stabilization piece, and that was a great amount of money coming in. So we were really relieved with that. The second was the Airbnb. Just had an Airbnb operator. We found one locally that didn't quite work out until my business partner decided to self-manage. Did a great job. They have glowing reviews. But we did start with a third-party short-term rental manager.
Yeah. I think we're starting to get maybe some better options now as people are getting more seasoned. But I've got short-term rentals in Nevada, Ohio, and Florida, and we just ultimately were like, let's build the system in-house. Nobody cares as much as you do. You keep it in-house, keep the higher margins. You're already managing the other tenants and spaces, so if you just build that process in.
Yeah. So you find the local cleaners or whatever other pieces of the process, and then you have an app or some form of software that helps integrate everything into one. Is that kind of how you handle it? Do you have a VA helping you with like calls and stuff?
So we have automated from our systems. We've automated as much as possible to where we'll primarily use Airbnb because it works in all markets except for Florida when you're doing luxury rentals, and then we'll throw in VRBO. But you can have a lot of automated messages. We have a go-to cleaner and a backup cleaner. We have 2 handymen, one specializing in just kind of everything, and one might have plumbing or just as a good backup, but then also having an electrician. And we found that tends to be a key one. And so we'll have that redundancy in each market to where there are boots on the ground. There are eyes. The cleaners also typically come with a handy partner. So then we can sometimes have them come in and fix things. And so we really leverage the cleaning aspect from a platform standpoint. On top of Airbnb, we have our own internal operating system. And so we have specific tasks and things that have links to where if we do have my executive assistant is also a property manager. So he'll do both. And so he's the one who's constantly doing any direct guest messaging if there's a question outside of it. But if he's on vacation, like he is now for the holiday, then it's easy for any other person, whether it's me or another owner, to come in for that specific property and take over because we have documented the systems and just styled that. And it doesn't have to be complex. It could just be like, here's how we operate this property, and here's our go-to stuff and what we will and won't do.
Sure. I mean, I know with some of these like projects, I mean, since they're newer construction, kind of higher end product, I mean, I would imagine the tenant interaction is probably a little bit less. So you automate a lot of these processes. Like most people don't want to be bothered. Like they want to know how to get in the property. If there's a particular issue on site, maybe they'll respond to you on the app, but otherwise they don't want to kind of interact with you, to be honest with you. So it's like,
and we found a key if we have a link. So what we created was a house manual for each unit within Canva. That way it's pretty and it looks good. And we have a link in the messenger. So literally it's okay, what questions are we getting asked all the time? Boom, it's in the house manual. Answer it before they ask it.
That's great. That's a smart way to do it. Well, that's awesome, man. And so you got now it's all stabilized. I know you're no longer involved in the actual building itself now, but obviously you've gotten a lot of unique experience from that. Like what are some of your future goals in development? I know you decided to take a little bit of a hiatus since that, but what are your thoughts on future projects?
Yeah, and there's a number of other topics, and they're just really boring. Things that I could bring up, like building access controls, or the whole internet connectivity issues. And there's like a lot of little micro challenges, which I'm happy to talk about further with anyone who wants to know. But there's
I think
20
it
of
might
those.
help if you could maybe even just list them off, because helping people just think one next layer and step could be very useful.
Sure. So like secondary issues, like for example, we have an elevator bank. So having a good elevator contractor, elevator is extremely expensive. That's one. There is the life-saving. There's the whole fire alarm system. If you have an old building, updating it. Well, we had to update it, and that was several $100,000. There's the whole technology. Actually, technology itself is a whole category that we dove into. Wi-Fi.
Low voltage.
I mean,
things,
low voltage. It just the parking. There's the garage. There's the ramp heater. There's parking management. That's another consideration. Building security outside the access controls. We're in an urban area. Like every other urban area, there's crime. There's transient people. There's things that happen like that. So you have to consider it. Lighting, safety. The normal issues that affect a building that are older, like water penetration, ventilation, some of the maintenance issues. I mean, those are the things I can think of off the top of my head.
Well, and on the maintenance issues, so I assume you guys are, as one entity, there's a property management entity, and then potentially are you charging the different tenants CAM for any shared expenses for exterior lighting or for general maintenance and upkeep?
Well, we were, but when we bought the building, it's a hybrid because we inherited lease agreements, and the lease agreements were a little different. This was during COVID when they were renegotiated before we purchased the building. So one of the tenants has what I think is a pretty good deal, and it was just a gross lease. The newer one we had is a modified gross. The retail tenants downstairs have a separate. So really, it's a whole medley of different. It's not consistent. Yes, we would love to have a common area, maintenance operating expense type lease arrangement, but that's what we inherited.
Yeah.
So we did the best
And
we could.
that's very common that you're going to have that. So just thinking as the developer of a mixed use multi-tenant space is that someone has to manage that. Someone has to track what each separate lease agreement is, what each different trigger is for rent increases and milestones and utilities, and how that's submetered and done, to where there's just thinking through the whole development and thinking through what could happen operationally. And that's where potentially talking to different property managers, I'll keep going back to it. I would say throw it into Perplexity, throw it into AI of any sort, and just ask the questions. What should I anticipate? There's going to be things on every project that you go, I didn't even know that was something I needed to consider or think about. Now I do. We joke, but there's a reason our due diligence checklists at the beginning of projects are like miles long. It's, these are all lessons learned, and then just knowing where to apply them.
Well, and to your point regarding the leases is getting expert opinions on it, because he was kind of referencing, we got the new tenant. That was all their efforts through being brokers and understanding what the market is. They got them on a modified gross, which is likely what market is in Lexington. I know a lot of office operators will do like a base year. So what they'll do is they'll say, okay, well, this year you have this rate, but anything, in future years, anything above whatever the base year expenses were, you pay a pro rata share of those expenses. Like that's very common in our market. Maybe different in other markets, so it just depends on the areas that you're in. And so engaging with professionals is important, because you may be leaving money on the table. You may be having some issues. Maybe you're having issues leasing the space because maybe you're asking for a rate that's above market, and maybe you're asking for triple net when the market is more like modified gross or gross, and so you may be shooting yourself in the foot a little bit if you're not really familiar with what the dynamics are locally. So.
And I don't want to really put you guys on the spot, but because you're brokers, are there any, like maybe a top couple of things that you advise your clients on for when they're negotiating leases and the terms, to say, hey, don't forget this, or this is really key for this type of retail tenant? I don't know if there's some good best practices or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, as a tenant rep, you're going to be obviously representing the tenant. So I'm going to try to, get them as low of a rent as possible. And if we can get them on a modified gross lease, power to you. I'll try to do everything I can to try to get the best possible deal. Now, if I was on the landlord side and I advised them, then that's where the market dynamics come into play and say, okay, well, let's educate you on what the market is. Because I've definitely worked with landlords in the past that, just to keep it simple, they say, I'm going to charge, $5,000 a month for the space. And then all of a sudden there's a reassessment on taxes, and, the tax bill jumps up, and they're like complaining about the fact they have to cover this tax bill. It's like, well, you could have now you're kind of put yourself in a bad spot where you have all these tenants on modified gross leases, and you have the expenses that are outpacing what their marginal bumps and rents are. So that's one. Number two is I try to avoid giving options if possible, or only offer one option, because you don't know what the market's going to be like in the future. So I've seen leases where they have like a 3-year lease with like 4 3-year options. And I'm just like, you literally shot yourself in the foot, because, in the next 6 years or 9 years, whatever that is, you don't know what the market's going to be like. Maybe it's the hottest market in the world and you can get double the rent based on what the option is. And so I've had clients that looked at investment opportunities, and we do a lease abstract where we look at all the leases and document all these different ways that the leases are orchestrated. And we just are like, this is a terrible investment, because, you're pretty much hamstringing yourself to this point. And so you go back to them and say, look, like, we can only pay you this because of the way that you've structured this lease. And oftentimes they're taken aback, but in reality, it's like, you've done this to yourself. And the reason you did it to yourself is because you didn't talk to someone who is an expert that could advise you to say, don't do this,
We've seen some whoppers in lease agreements.
Oh, it's horrendous.
And lawyers are great.
Horrendous.
Lawyers are fantastic. They'll show you theoretically how the law works and case law and whatnot, and that's very, very important. We always advise that. We will show you how it plays out in real life and what we've seen. So, yeah.
And this is the value of, again, we say it's strategic partners with your brokers, your lenders, contractors, architects, engineers. The reason that they are your strategic partner is you guys really dial in and hone in on, this is it. This is what I do day in and day out. This is what I see from the landlord side, from the tenant side. So just going that extra mile and asking, agree. I have seen many lease agreements in both directions where it's like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and two, I mean, so oftentimes, and this is what we contend with a lot with like landlords sometimes, is that they're saying, well, I have to pay you a fee in order to help out with this project or whatever. And, when you start looking back and you say, well, if you just paid a small fee in the front end, you could have saved yourself, huge
Hundreds
issue
of
with
thousands and time.
and property value, or like short, people don't ever look at opportunity cost. And I think that's the hardest part, is that, and this happens in the investor mindset all the time. And I know plenty of investors who are like, oh, well, I'll just go ahead and manage the project, even though they've never done it. Oh, I'll just go with the cheapest person to get this project done, right? And they just keep going and going. And all of a sudden, they start digging themselves in a hole. The project takes longer than expected. The cost starts to balloon because there's a bunch of change orders or things are done wrong, and you have to come in and fix the work that was done before. And by the end of it, you look at it and say, it costs the same or not more. And you've lost time, which in my opinion, time is money. So now you're factoring in an additional layer. I'm of the mindset, it's better to pay someone that's good at what they do once than it is to pay 5 people that are marginally good to do the same work, because they're going to mess it up. So it's one of those things where, sometimes you have to pay for good service, and that's, going to save you money in the long run.
Yeah, pay me $1 now or $2 later.
Yeah, or $10. Yeah, I mean, it could be way more than that.
I've seen it so much. I've been brought in on some massive developments in California. I mean, one, I was telling someone the other day, they were probably a quarter of the way into construction, and come to find out they don't have water rights. They're building this massive shopping center, multi-tenant buildings, out parcels. They don't have the access to water. LA County was out of water. So I ended up coming in and digging in down to the one family who owns all the water, who then ground leases for 99 years, and you have to buy it from them. So, $750,000 later, and a month worth of only focusing on that, now they can get water to all their sites. And if you think about it, so one, they lost a month of time, not a full month because they were able to stage construction in different ways. But if they hadn't gotten water, if it had taken a longer solution, all those tenants, the national tenants, they have clauses in their leases that you hit this delivery date or you pay penalties. So I've come in on so many projects where the developer has lost millions for things that could have worked out well, but the projects are so big, they still make millions. So, the story, the highlight reel is, hey, we made 20 million. Yeah, you could have made 32.
Yeah. And when you start contending with nationals too, I mean, they've got legal departments that are no joke. So it's like, you got to have your P's and Q's, figured out, or mind your P's and Q's, or cross your T's and dot your I's. That's the tough one. Well, that's great. I think, Kristi, how'd you feel about the conversation? Do you think it was pretty helpful?
I think this was so beneficial, and I like that we got granular in some of the areas because we haven't talked that way before in some aspects. So I think this is very, very helpful. And yeah, to your point, it's one project that you got into. You had a couple different partners, and that's the truth. You normally have partners who have money, but not necessarily the time or the expertise, but they want to follow along. They want to be part. Some of the people are the sweat equity, roll up the sleeves. And sweat equity goes a long way in development because the projects are long and they can be phased and it can be multiple years. So you having that know-how or having the right mentors or people behind you to go through it, that sweat equity is worth it in that partnership. So I think this was awesome.
Yeah, no, I'm thankful, Will, for obviously working with you, and I'm glad you were able to share some insights on the podcast. I know it was super helpful. One thing that we do is, I think I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but typically what we like to do at the end of a podcast is we have this concept called the developer vault. So we try to provide, our audience with just goodies and things that they can access, and it's free to our listeners. And I just wanted to see if you had, or you could think about it. You don't have to tell us right now, but maybe come up with something that you could share in the developer vault for.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I got a few ideas.
Yeah. So we'll make sure to include Will's contribution to there as well, so you can check it out. It should be a good one, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate the hosting it. Thank you.
Awesome. So if people want. Go ahead.
I was going to say, how can people reach out to you? Clearly, you guys have a brokerage. So if they're in the area and they're looking for help, and or if they're just curious and like, oh, like that was a really cool story. I'm a broker too. I'm thinking about development. Maybe they want to reach out and ask a question. How can they connect?
Sure. Our website has a lot of information. It's sumcg.com, sumcg.com. My email, will@sumcg.com, Raphael @sumcg.com. I don't mind giving my cell number out. It's 5.
True broker right there. Like, bring the deals, exactly. Bring the leads, content.
Well, we love talking shop too. We love what we do. So
yeah, and then obviously too, one of the benefits too of what Will does is that he has that developer mind. He obviously has gone through it. He's been in the weeds on large projects. He understands how these projects come together. His company, the family's company in the past used to be a construction company. So they worked a lot in massive projects all around town. So he's got that base and knowledge of how things work in that regard. So if you guys are developers in general and are looking to operate in this region, I mean, it's good to talk to someone who knows what developers go through, Yeah. So, well, Will, it's great to see you as always. I'm obviously got my office next door to you, so I'll see you here shortly. But for those of you guys who listen to the podcast in a podcast format, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. It makes a big impact on our ability to reach a broader audience. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It makes a big impact, as I said before, and we want to make sure that as many people as possible can listen to our podcast and hopefully take on their first development project. So thanks again so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time.